Now that we've put in a lot of work developing our React application, it's time for us to go through and learn how to deploy it, and we're going to use Netlify to do that. So to deploy our React application, like I mentioned, we're going to be using Netlify to do that. And Netlify has a couple of perks that are going to be really nice to us. It has a free plan that we're going to be able to use because we're just deploying a static website to it, and we don't need any of the administrative or fine-grained high-performance things just yet anyway. But I actually use Netlify to deploy CoderJourney.com, and so that's why we're going to be using it here. But we're going to show two different ways to deploy the same application. And the first thing that we need to do is learn how to actually build our React application for production. So from within our repo, if we take a look at our package.json, you can see that we have a couple scripts here, and one of them is build. So React scripts build will actually build a production release of an application. So for us to run that, we're going to use yarn run build. And this will go off and actually turn our entire application, which is using ES6 modules, it will transpile that down into ES5 for us, and then it'll also do a bunch of other things to make sure that we're not duplicating things, and it'll minify our code and get everything to be basically as small as we can get it to be, and bundle it in such a way that it's easy to deploy. So Yarn says to add a global add serve, which this is a function that'll let us set up a web server, and then the build directory. So if we take a look at our build directory that we have, this is what we get. It creates for us a complete static website, basically. So we have an index.html, which will allow us to serve this from the root of a web server. And then it has all these relative paths that it itself is going to use. So we can take this one directory and serve it up. If we scroll back up and take a look at what it told us to do, it said add serve. So we want this serve thing, and then we're going to run serve and then give it the directory of build to use. I already have this installed, so I'm not going to reinstall it now, but I can do serve s build. And this will start on localhost 5000. So if we come back over here and open this up, we should see our application, and logging in should still work. And it does. And we can see our songs there too. An interesting thing to look at with this is that we had to use environment variables when we first set up our application in base. So if we look in source base.js, we use React app, Firebase key, etc., all these React app underscore prefix things. These are environment variables that we're loading in through a .env file. But when we go and build this for production, they're going to be substituted in for these values. There's not going to be the environment variable aspect to them anymore. So when building this for production, you probably want to substitute these for different keys, and that's what we're going to be doing a little bit later on. Jumping back over to Netlify, you're going to need to sign up, and sign up is free, like I said, and then you'll come in here and actually take a look at things. I've created a separate team for tutorials. So you should be able to see all of your sites. I don't currently have any sites here, and there are two different ways that we are going to deploy our application today. One of them is going to be new with Git, but this is going to be our final way of doing it. And the first one is to just drag the actual folder in here to deploy it. And this works great if you're working on something that is a prototype or something you just want to throw away or share with somebody for a brief moment. It'll get deployed really fast, and you can tear it down really easily. So if I open this directory up in Finder and I grab my build directory and I drag it over here, it'll go through and it's going to do a bunch of things behind the scenes to actually build this. But since it's static, there's not a whole lot that it has to do because it's not going to run any code. And then it gives us a randomly generated name that we click this and it'll show us our actual application. We're not in perfect shape just yet. If we click here and try to log on with Facebook, it's going to actually freak out on us a little bit, and you'll see why here in a second. And that is because we get an error that we're basically just not allowed to do this. If we expand this particular error, you'll see this domain is not authorized, and so we would have to add that. We're not going to worry about that right now because this isn't the primary way that we're going to go about deploying our application. But if we take a look back at Netlify for this particular app, and you go into settings, you can see a bunch of different things here. In fact, you can actually see that if we didn't do any of this stuff on our own, it would go through and bundle and minify our CSS and JavaScript, and you could get it to set up other things too. And in the deploy part here, there's still this drop zone. So if you wanted to redeploy or you made some changes, you built locally and you wanted to update the application, you could just do the same thing that we just did by grabbing the build directory that you have newly run, yarn run build, and then dragging that in here to update this application. Like I said, this is not going to be the primary way that we work with deploying these things. So we're actually going to go in here and delete this site. Oops. So we're going to delete this in favor of using a new site from Git. So we're going to click this. I only want you guys to see my public stuff. Log in with GitHub. And then this will pull in all the GitHub repos. So Chords is where I actually host this. So we're going to click this. And then it gives us some more settings. So it'll say, okay, we want to build master. This is cool. That means anytime I merge something into master, it will automatically get deployed. And to deploy the source code, we want to tell it a command to run, which is going to be npm run build, which works out perfectly for us. And then it's going to publish the build directory. So this is exactly what we did locally. It kind of knows out of the box to do this for us. So that's pretty cool. And then we're going to say this is part of our team and to deploy the site. This will go off and do a lot more than it did before because it actually, behind the scenes, will pull down an image, build up a container, and then go through the process of doing the same things that we just did. So right now it's installing things using Yarn. Okay, the site build is completed, and this is going to take longer than it will most times because it has to go and do this first build portion. It can use its own cache kind of behind the scenes on subsequent tries. So now if we click this to go check out our site, we don't see anything. And if we take a look at the errors that pop up in the console, you'll see that Firebase fatal error can't determine Firebase database URL. And this is because those environment variables we were talking about in our base.js don't exist yet. And that's because we didn't build locally where we have an env file. So if we shut this, we can go take a look at our settings. And in here, there's build environment variables. And so this is what we would want to do. We want to edit these variables, and we would take, for instance, all of the things that we have in source base.js. We would take these keys right here. So take this, pop it here, and then put the value that we got from our Firebase config into here. So you can essentially take your .env file and all the key value pairs you have in here, you're going to manually punch them into here. Unfortunately, it shows the values. This isn't a password field. So everything I put in here is going to be displayed to you. But I was already thinking about that. So I created a separate application for this. So we're going to do chord editor staging, which has never been used for anything. And we're just not even going to worry about the fact that we're displaying all of this stuff to you. So I'm going to bounce back and forth so you can actually still see me do this, but it's not going to be very exciting. So I'm going to probably do it as like a time lapse. Okay, now we have all of our keys set up. So we're going to come back up here to the deploys tab, and we're going to trigger a deploy. Notice we're not going to click clear the cache build. So this will cause it to actually happen quite a bit faster than it did before, but it's going to pull the same source code. Now that the site is live, if we come back over and refresh, we can see that our site is working. But if we try to log in, we're going to run into those errors that I mentioned earlier. And this is because we don't actually have this URL set up to be authenticated. And we know this by checking in here. If we click at this error, you'll see that we're getting some interesting things here. But basically, there are a couple different problems that we're having. So one of them is going to be right here. It tells us that access is not configured. And there are two things we have to fix. We have to fix something with the identity provider. And this is something we haven't actually seen up till now. And it's different than when we worked in development. So if we copy this URL and we head to it, it'll actually take us to the console for the Google developer tools. And we're in the right project. But basically, when we're actually working with something other than localhost, we're going to need to enable this. So we want to enable this particular thing. And then the other problem that we're going to have is we need to take this URL and we need to go back over and head to our application, go to sign-in methods, and then down here for authorized domain, we need to add that as an authorized domain. So We'll just paste that in here. I don't know if it matters with the okay, it removes the HTTP, so we're good. So we have this as our authorized domain now. And it does say down here that if you just enabled it, then maybe wait a few minutes, but we're going to give it a shot right now. So we're going to come back to our app. We're going to do a hard refresh just in case. Go to register, log in with Facebook, and now you can see that it's punting us off to the right spot. Continue as Keith. And now we're logged in again. And we should be able to create our first song. And there it is. So one thing you might have seen me do is stealthily not just refresh the page when I was on a URL like this. If I just hit enter right now, we're going to get this 404. And that is actually because the way that Netlify works is we need something slightly different in order to get it to redirect all of these URLs back to our index.html. So that is kind of the problem that we're having right now. And that was happening by default for us with Webpack. We just kind of didn't know it behind the scenes. So for that, we need to add a configuration file that will cause Netlify to redirect all of the traffic to our subroutes back to our root, which is our React application. So for that, we need to go into our public directory and we want to create an _redirect file with an S. It's very important that it's spelled exactly correct. And then in here, we want to redirect everything underneath slash to /index.html with a 200 status. We will save that. So we have a public redirects file. And what happens is if we run yarn run build, this will actually get transferred into our build directory at the root level. And that is where Netlify is going to be seeing it and causing the redirects to happen. So if we take a look inside of build now, you can see that there's a redirects file. So let's commit this. We're going to git commit add redirects file, then push this. After the deploy is finalized, we should be able to refresh this page and actually see our songs page instead of a 404 page. With our build being finished, we should be able to refresh this page and actually have it redirect where we wanted to. I hope that this tutorial showed you that building a React application is pretty simple with Create React App. And really what you need to know in the deployment process is although we did a couple very specific things to Netlify with the redirects file and going through their actual user interface, you can put your build directory anywhere that can serve static content, and you'll have to do a little bit of configuration to get the push state stuff to work like we did right here, but that isn't anything outside the realm of possible. So let me know where you're deploying your React application to. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, be sure to leave a comment down below telling me why you liked it and what you're going to do with this knowledge. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you can get more of these tutorials each week. And also don't forget to join us on Patreon, Facebook, Slack, so you can keep the chat going, and on Twitter. But as always, have a nice week.